The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, yes. Good morning. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Michael Halepas. As you can see, this talk is titled A Law Enforcement Approach to Digital Assets. Obviously, I can't talk you through every topic in this subject in the time allowed. I've got quite a few slides. I shall fly through them. If there are any questions on any of the slides, if you'd like to see copies of the slides or the underlying documents, please feel free to approach me later. I am a barrister from London in England. Most of my career, so about 99%, I've practiced in criminal law. I'm currently a consultant to the Council of Europe's Economic Crime and Cooperation Division. I'm also a consultant to the Legal Services Panel of the Government of the British Virgin Islands. This year I launched my own project, BlockAML, which offers consulting and training services at the intersection of financial crime, anti-money laundering, suspicious activity reporting, and digital assets. Formerly, I was the lead digital assets prosecutor in an offshore jurisdiction. That role involved me plugging gaps in the jurisdiction's crypto capabilities. I drafted the jurisdiction's parallel virtual assets investigation strategy. I devised and delivered law enforcement training. Feel free to find me on social media. Ready? Great. Okay, so regardless of who's in my audience, whether they be tax officers, police officers, intelligence staff, regulators, Ethereum devs, the message is the same. The initial message is the same. Digital assets are a bona fide asset class. They're not criminal per se, and we need to begin, in my view, considering them as capable of constituting property that can be held, stored, transferred, stolen, held on trust. Obviously, the people in this room know that blockchain enables permissionless, borderless, instant, immutable transfers of value across the internet rails. So instantly, we should see that there are significant money laundering, terrorist financing, crime risks using this technology. From a law enforcement background, everything that we do as law enforcement officers, or when I was a law enforcement officer, is concerned with protecting the public. The law enforcement purpose requires that we prevent, detect, investigate, and disrupt criminals where possible. Now, before I go any further, it's really important that I emphasize that apparently last year, $3.1 trillion of illicit funds passed through TradFi. So criminals are already laundering their criminal proceeds. So that is property that is generated from criminal conduct, or property that is intended to be used in criminal conduct. So the criminals, they already have their methods, and they're doing it already. So this is certainly not a talk to talk down people's use of digital assets, far from it. So what I'd like to discuss today is to share some ideas, some experiences, some data with you. Just looking at the current landscape, I know those of you who were in the previous talk heard quite a bit about regulation, and you might have heard of the Financial Action Task Force, or FATF, as I call them for short. It's an intergovernmental organisation which sets the standards or makes recommendations to jurisdictions around the world, sets the bar quite high to help jurisdictions to combat the crime risks of money laundering and terrorist financing. June 2019 was quite a seminal year as far as FATF and digital assets are concerned, because FATF acknowledged that digital assets are quite important, and it brought them within their standards. VASPs, or virtual asset service providers, or CASPs, crypto asset service providers if you're in Europe, since 2019 are expected to implement measures such as customer due diligence, to know the identity of the customers that you're dealing with, to introduce record keeping, and to report suspicious transactions. As a speaker before me mentioned, there is something called the travel rule. I won't delve into it too deeply, but it's introducing the requirement or the expectation that VASPs will collect, store, transfer beneficiary and originator data with transactions. So from a law enforcement purpose, in theory, that's wonderful, because if we are investigating a suspected crime, in theory, we can go to a cooperative VASP and ask them for proof of identity documents, account opening documents, transactional history of the account that we're interested in, that we are investigating. A few documents here. If you'd like to know more about these documents, I can share them with you later. Really, really interesting documents. The top one is an Interpol paper that was released in April this year regarding the cybercrime threats in the continent of Africa. Really interesting document, really well thought out. And I think what's really important from it is that ransomware is rampant and is on the rise. We know that ransomware payments are often demanded in virtual assets, digital assets. It's said that currently there are over 650 million Africans who use mobile phone devices as their primary means of accessing the internet. Now, I've included that in there just to emphasize that as an attack area, as an attack surface, that's huge, 650 million devices, and that will only grow. We know that cybercrime is surging across the continent, and it requires attention. The other document is again from January this year, the state of financial crime. It's said that cybercrime is anticipated to cost $9.5 trillion this year. By 2027, it's expected that the number of connection points across the Internet of Things will almost double to 29 billion. So again, reminding that as an attack surface for criminals, it's massive, and it requires our attention. 2031, as you can see, ransomware victims are expected to lose $265 billion, with attacks expected every 2 seconds. That blew my mind when I read that. So you've all heard of Chainalysis. I've got some useful charts of theirs to talk you through. Annually, Chainalysis produce their state of crypto crime report with really, really useful data. I've included these two charts here. You can see at the top of the screen. What I noticed is interesting here with the total cryptocurrency value received by wallets that are identified as illicit is that you can see that there's a huge uptick in 2022 and 2023 in sanctions activity. So there was a major event in Eastern Europe, Q1 of 2022, and you can see that in a US dollar sanctioned environment, unsurprisingly perhaps, sanctioned activity has increased. Something to be aware of if you're a VASP. Bottom half of the screen, you can see I've included this one because it's so important. In a world of FUD in crypto, and we don't need any more FUD, it's said that a minuscule amount, 0.34% of all crypto transactions in the world are illicit. Now, to my mind, that's relatively small. Obviously, we want to work together in the space to reduce that number to as little as we can. But my point is that we already have tremendous amounts of FUD in this space, with 0.34% of the transactions being illicit. I wouldn't like to think how much FUD will flow if that number increases in the coming years. Again here, again from the Chainalysis report, at the top half of the screen, you can see illicit transaction volume by crime category. And what's interesting is that with both of these charts, actually, Bitcoin traditionally was a preferred choice for bad actors misusing digital assets. Stablecoins now, something to bear in mind for devs, I think. The next slide. So this is total cryptocurrency laundered by year at the top. So you can see there's been a reduction in the overall volume between 22 and 23, which I suppose is cause for optimism. But again, think of that number: 22.2 billion US dollars of illicit crypto transactions. Compare that to 3.1 trillion dollars of illicit traditional finance activity. Just to put it in perspective. In the bottom half, you can see the destination of crypto leaving wallets that have been identified as illicit. And why this is interesting, why I've included it, is that you can see that most illicit crypto, if I can call it that, travels to centralized exchanges, which is really pleasing for someone like me, for law enforcement officers, because although, as you know, you cannot trace transactions on the blockchain through a centralized exchange, we know that if we're dealing with a cooperative exchange in a cooperative jurisdiction, and bear in mind not all VASPs are the same and not all jurisdictions are the same, but in theory that gives us hope, because those VASPs should be storing really helpful, useful, identifying information on the persons controlling the wallet, because, bless you, because we can't prosecute a pseudonymous wallet address. We're looking to identify with reasonable certainty the person or persons controlling that wallet. Again, a few more charts to show you, because I'm at an ETH event, so I wanted to focus a little bit on DeFi and hacking. Top slide, top half of the screen, I've included that because you'd see that whereas 21 and 22, there were quite a lot of value stolen through hacks. There was a drop, a sizable drop in 23. Interested to hear what your thoughts are on that. My suggestion is that perhaps that drop has to do with more robust security features on platforms. Maybe developers are improving their services. The bottom half, we can see that in terms of crypto value stolen and hacks by a victim platform type, DeFi is the number one. Now, taking my lawyer hat off and putting my crypto native hat on, one of the reasons causing me to hold back from involving myself in DeFi platforms is the fear that my funds will be stolen and hacked. So I hope that with time, the security measures will improve further. Again, sticking with DeFi hacks, so you can see the top chart shows you the value of crypto stolen. I've included the bottom chart because I think it's interesting to see that the three main attack vectors when it comes to DeFi hacks are price manipulation hacks, compromised private keys, and smart contract exploitation. Also, I've included this for pump and dumps because, again, we're at an ETH event. These are just my views, but you can see here that the coins that have been identified as potentially pump and dump schemes, okay, the value, they're decreasing in number, but here on the bottom chart in December 23, I mean, we won't talk about May 23, but December 23, it was almost 10% still of ERC20 tokens were categorized as potentially pump and dump. My view is that these data here erode trust in the network, and I would hope that over time those numbers decrease. Right, let's move on to some case studies. And of course, you'll understand I'm not going to share any sensitive information. I'll talk you through some examples. Right, this one, you might recognize the port top left, and you might recognize the court bottom right. This is not a case from Belgrade. This is one of my previous cases. Now, I've included this because it's really important. It might have a most important slide. I'd say it's probably this one. I want you to think that when we're talking about criminal investigations, we're not simply talking about identifying illicit funds, identifying illicit Ethereum, Bitcoin, or whatever, and confiscating it. That's great if we can do that in the public interest, but there's so much more to this that we need to open our minds to. So, for instance, there are issues in criminal proceedings that parallel virtual asset investigations can assist with. Let me give you this example. So again, no names. This is definitely not a case from Belgrade. This is one of mine from elsewhere. So let's say on a ferry from another country, an 18-year-old will say that he is a trainee plumber. 18-year-old trainee plumber, not earning much money, arrives in a fancy-looking 4x4. Customs officers at the port terminal search the vehicle, and they locate 1 kilogram of cocaine in the rear of the vehicle. The street value of that cocaine is 6 figures in pounds, and obviously importing cocaine, Class A drug, possession of cocaine with intent to supply, they can carry quite hefty prison sentences. But of course, in a criminal organisation, those at the bottom, those who are mere couriers, those who perhaps are doing it as a one-off, will expect to receive a lower prison sentence than, say, top of the chain, the organiser. Now, this individual, this 18-year-old, we'll call him a plumber, trainee plumber, admitted to possession of the cocaine and said, yes, you've got me. It's a one-off. I'm a mere courier. I have nothing more to do with drug supply. I was just doing this as a one-off. I have no profit to gain from this activity, so please sentence me accordingly. Now, having defended people in the past, that's great. If you can agree a basis of plea with the prosecution to commit your client to being at the very bottom of the run of the organisation, that's fantastic when it comes to mitigating in their sentence hearing. Well, what if we conducted a parallel virtual asset investigation into this individual? So the drugs case proceeded with my colleagues, and what if we looked into the digital assets holdings of this individual? And what if we identified that one of this 18-year-old trainee plumber's crypto exchange accounts saw $100,000 worth of stablecoin passing through it in the previous year? Would that indicate that perhaps this individual is not a mere courier in the organisation? Would it be information that the sentencing court would want to rely on to paint a more accurate picture of their activity? So this is why I say these virtual asset investigations are so much more important than simply identifying illicit crypto to confiscate. Right, another two. One on the left, this is not one of my cases. This is from England, from the northwest of England. And I've included these because the point I want to make here is that, again, we're not looking to identify a wallet and prosecute a wallet. Very often we are relying on, or law enforcement officers are relying on, traditional investigative techniques. So you might look at bank statements, messages, handwritten notes, confessions perhaps, in interview. Now, you're looking at a message chain from a cash courier for a heroin distributing gang in the UK. Now, the courier was stopped, searched, the phone was found, the message chain was analysed, there's a Bitcoin wallet address in there with some other important information, and from that mobile phone, the whole heroin distributing gang was captured. The whole gang unravelled. So again, just the point is that it's traditional investigative techniques. Obviously, we need to improve and increase training to law enforcement officers to know what a randomly generated sequence of digits means, what to look out for. On the right, that's a Google image, but that's related to a case of mine that I worked in, where there was no evidence in bank statements of money moving from bank to exchange. There was no evidence in text messages, no admissions in interview. One of the defendants had a journal seized from them on arrest. Admittedly, I didn't spot the evidence first time I reviewed the journal, but the second time I reviewed the journal, I found on one page, in fact in a corner of one page of a journal, that there was evidence that this defendant held, owned, controlled digital assets. We investigated, and it turned out that there were perhaps interested parties, law enforcement agencies in at least one other jurisdiction. So again, this is more for police. Police need to understand what to look for in customs officers. These ones here, so we'll go left to right. So again, the law enforcement purpose is essentially to protect the public, and it includes efforts such as public outreach campaigns. So the top left one, a very sad case of a scam. A scam, I don't want to say crypto crime, it was a scam, and crypto was involved. But in this one, I advise the police on recommendations that they can make to the public. So lawyers worked with police, public outreach, to help educate the public on what to watch out for. I mean, each one of these slides separately is responsible for tremendous FUD in this space. And one of the things I try to do is to tackle the FUD. In the centre, you see an article relating to pig butchering. I'm sure you've heard what that is. Essentially, it's a social engineering scam that involves crypto. And on the right, we have the gentleman who is single-handedly probably responsible for most of the FUD in the space. It's described in various articles as a crypto crime, but it's anything but. That is a fraud. And if you read the prosecution and defence documents that were made public in that case, in my description, it is a case of a relentless and serious fraud. And that's all it is. And in fact, if you read the forfeiture documents in that case, over half of the forfeiture application document relates not to crypto assets, but to illegal political donations. Essentially, here, I believe that we need to increase communication and we need to increase education of the public to at least understand the basics of blockchain and really self-custody, because if the public knew more about self-custody, articles like these wouldn't have such punch. Okay, so challenges and limitations, just a few, some of them that I can think of. You had the previous speaker talking about regulations and so on, right? And it's great. But what is clear today, well, in fact, that paper up there is from April 2024. As at April 2024, 76 of the FATF member jurisdictions had not even made a start on a crypto regulatory regime. Now that needs to change, but there are weaknesses in the system, and you're looking at them. If we talk about the geographic region with the most unregulated virtual asset service providers, is the continent of Europe. And over here, bottom left, you can see a chart showing the jurisdictions that haven't started in purple, the ones that have regulatory regimes in place. If I were a criminal looking to launder criminal digital assets or tainted digital assets, tainted by criminality, I'm probably going to send them to a VASP in an unregulated jurisdiction. Law enforcement officers, if they're dealing with one of these parallel virtual asset investigations, should be alive to individuals who insist on always transacting with unregulated jurisdictions. Why would you be doing that? Is a question to be asked. Here, so just some of the challenges. Moving forward, airdrops, yield, dynamic NFTs. So traditionally, it's a bag of cash, or it's jewelry, or it's a car that is tainted by criminality. That's great. It's nice and easy. It's very easy to ascertain the value a bag of cash can remain in the police storeroom. But what I want people, regulators, devs and so on, just to apply their minds to is that we have entered a world now where criminal property in this realm is capable in certain circumstances of increasing in value and generating criminal property on top of criminal property on top of criminal property. So for instance, if I'm a criminal, if I steal a car and sell a car for cash and buy a dynamic NFT with that cash, the dynamic NFT, as with the other side, I'm sure you're aware of, has a potential to generate resources and to increase in value over time. Well, in theory, if the digital asset, if the dynamic NFT is criminal, is tainted when I purchase it, we need to be thinking, when I say we, law enforcement officers need to be thinking about the potential for the criminal property to generate resources that are tainted, and they should be considered in confiscation proceedings as well. Again, I don't have any real affiliation to Jupiter. It's quite a cool graphic. If I'm a criminal interacting with the DEX and I'm rewarded by airdrop for my activity using tainted crypto, law enforcement officers need to be aware of the potential for the airdrops to be tainted and therefore subject or targets of confiscation. Again, the same with staked Ethereum. If the Ethereum that I have is tainted by my criminality, then what about the yield? We shouldn't ignore these. Again, I had to include a slide about terrorist financing. It wouldn't be a law enforcement talk on crypto if I didn't. So it's not just these ones here, but we've got to think about, especially DeFi platforms. The North Korean missile program is said to have been funded by tainted crypto. Terrorist groups have discovered that setting up a crypto wallet is a lot easier for them than opening up a bank account. And it's happening. This activity is happening. There is one extremist group which has an ideological preference for crypto. I won't tell you on camera, I'll tell you later if you want to know, but we need to be alive to these. Right, future directions as I see them. I had to include this one. This gentleman's appeal is pending, so I won't say too much about it, and I don't know all of the facts, but clearly there are individual rights to privacy. Clearly, DeFi has the potential for tremendous financial inclusion in places where banks don't operate. So DeFi can be a force for good. At the same time, a balance will have to be struck in future somehow. If we want this technology to go mainstream, don't shoot the messenger, but we have to acknowledge that transparency must increase. I don't have the answer to these questions, but I know that a Dutch court, a court in Europe, whether right or wrong, it might have been a boomer judge who doesn't understand technology properly, but courts increasingly are cracking down on developers of platforms. And my suggestion is that over time, turning a blind eye, saying, well, I set up the contract and that's it, I can't do anything about illicit activity on the platform, it probably won't wash. Will this mean that developers will go pseudonymous like Satoshi? I don't know. Will it push people to develop platforms using AI to scan the wallets they interact with? Possibly. I hope that might be one of the solutions, but this is something for devs in particular to think about. Again, mining. If you don't know what cryptojacking is, ask me later. But mining shouldn't be forgotten about, because typically miners are not required to implement anti-money laundering rules, regulations such as know your customer. And there's at least one case I can think of, I think it's in Spain, where a criminal organisation bought a warehouse, bought lots of mining equipment with criminal property, so the mining equipment is criminal, and they just mine clean, if we can call it that, digital assets. That's something to be aware of as well. We know that the Iranian regime is mining to generate funds. And then this one lastly. So this is a very interesting document. Europol put out a document in, I think, October 22, talking about crimes in the metaverse. Interpol followed it with a really, really thoughtful document that I can share with you later if you like. And it discusses crimes in Web3, in the metaverse, which I believe, I might be wrong, but I believe this is the first document that has given a title, a name to these offences, meta crimes. This chart here is again, it's thought-provoking because it suggests a range of crime types that can be committed in and through Web3. And as we move into this Web3 future, this Web3 world, we're still very early, but we need to open our minds to the potential for abuse, sex offences, data theft, stolen digital assets, all sorts of crime types that could be committed in there. However, it's not all negative. Web3 holds the potential for real gains in terms of training, meetings. Imagine if you could take a jury to a virtual crime scene rather than having to rely on a witness to draw an X on a map. Or high stress, for instance, terrorist scenarios for training police officers to replicate these training scenarios in Web3. These can't be done traditionally, so it's not all bad, but we need to be open to the potential for criminality, NFTs even being used in crime in the metaverse. And in conclusion, just some points for me. So if we're focusing on law enforcement, it's essential that law enforcement officers, agencies, public agencies around the world stay updated on the technology. The training has to be continuous. You can't just do one course on what are digital assets and then forget about it. The training, we know that the technology develops at such a rapid pace that the training and education should be continuous and should focus on emerging technologies. In my view, cooperation, collaboration, communication between private, public, between devs. I recommend that devs contact their regulators and engage them in dialogue to introduce them to some of the ideas that you're working on. And one of the weaknesses at the moment is the compliance function. The compliance tools are very often not interoperable. That should change over time. I hope it does. And that's it. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for your patience. If you have any questions, fire away.
I guess everyone's ready for lunch. There is one.
Hi, thank you. So I just want to confirm if I got this correctly. So from the standpoint of the law enforcement, is there a push or desire to get crypto and Web3 regulated to the amount of the other financial institutions? So it's like, as a regular practice, get like same as you're getting bank statements to get everything sorted.
Thank you. Thanks for that question. I think that there's a push to move more in line with TradFi. Obviously, the two industries are different. Obviously, data protection is very important. Even with bank statements, when we obtain bank statements, you're not interested in every transaction on the bank statement, just some of them. So GDPR in Europe plays a part. But yes, it does. And I think over time, I don't know what the answer is. We're in such an exciting space. We're so early. I don't know what that future looks like. But if I had to place a bet on it, over time, transparency will increase. And for this technology to go mainstream, it's inevitable. It's inevitable in regulated jurisdictions that this will happen more. I hope that answers your question.
If I understood correctly, we're moving towards an era where developers will be held accountable for permissionless systems, and they cannot just deny responsibility over criminal activity that happens there. Does it mean that developers could be criminally charged for not enforcing enough security to prevent criminal activity on protocols?
Thank you. You remind me of something else, by the way. So one of the suggestions I have is maybe that we will see platforms move to more, for example, like Tether, where they have the ability to freeze the funds. I wonder if that will increase over time. It's tricky because we know that, especially in America and here in Europe, there's a push to crack down on this activity, and they want to hold people accountable. One of the appeal points in the Tornado Cash case, I believe, is the fact that, well, look, it was a tool. He just set up a tool, right? What I'm certain of is that there will have to be a balance struck. There has to be. The privacy tools have a real legitimate use case, right? It's not all criminals. The trouble is FUD. FUD is really extreme in this industry. I don't know. I'm here to speak to devs. I hope that you have some suggestions. But all I know is that turning up to court and saying, tough, what can I do about it? It's not my problem. It's probably not going to wash. So far, it hasn't washed. So somehow we need to engage, discuss with each other, and figure out what that balance is going to look like. So I don't mean to scare people. I'm just sharing ideas. That's all. Thank you for your question.
Thank you very much for a very nice presentation.